You come up onto the porch after a long walk through the high grass. The sun is getting heavy, casting long shadows across the yard. You sit down on the top step, and your dog comes over to lean his weight against your knee. You are running your hand through his fur, just feeling the day cool off. And then you feel it, a hard, swollen lump right behind the ear. A tick. Your stomach drops. It always does. You think about the Lyme disease. You think about the joint pain and the fever. But then your mind goes straight to the alternative. You think about those little plastic tubes of chemical liquid you buy at the vet. The ones you pay $20 or $30 a month for. The ones with the heavy warning labels printed on the back. The labels that tell you in bold letters not to let your children touch the dog after you put it on. Now I want you to sit with this. You are putting a synthetic neurotoxin on the animal that sleeps at the foot of your child's bed. You are paying good money to bring that into your home. The old woodsman and the farmers who cleared this valley, they had a way to kill ticks. They used the oil from a cedar tree. It cost about $2 to make a batch. It will not hurt your dog, and it works. My name is Levi Stoltzfus. I am Amish, and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Today, we are going to talk about keeping ticks off your family and your animals. I will be honest with you right at the start, the way I always am. This cedar spray is completely safe for humans. It is safe for horses, and it is safe for dogs. But it is not safe for cats. A cat's liver works completely differently than ours. It cannot break down the oils the way a dog can. Honest is better than impressive. If you have dogs and kids running in the yard, learning this old way will change how you survive the summer. The English buy these chemicals by the crate. They let them seep right into their dogs' bloodstreams month after month. But why do the big pharmaceutical companies rely on these lab-made poisons when the simple tree oil works just as well? We will look at that later. Let's look at what is actually in those little tubes first. The ones you snap open and squeeze onto the back of your dog's neck. You know the smell, that sharp chemical odor that lingers in the living room all evening. If you read the tiny print on the foil, you will see names like fipronil or permethrin. These are synthetic neurotoxins. They are designed in a laboratory to attack a nervous system. The way they work is they absorb through the skin. They go deep into the dog's fat and right into the bloodstream. The chemical waits there. It has to wait until the tick actually bites your dog, drinks the blood, and takes the poison into its own body. The tick has to bite your dog for the medicine to work. The very thing you are trying to prevent has to happen first. And that poison doesn't just bother the tick. 2 summers ago, my neighbor, an English fellow who keeps a few acres next to mine, put one of those expensive spot-on treatments on his golden retriever. By evening, that dog was pacing the floor, whining, trying to scratch a spot he couldn't reach. The skin was bright red and hot to the touch. The Environmental Protection folks in Washington, the EPA, they have looked at the incident data on these spot-on treatments. They track the adverse reactions in pets. Sometimes it is just red, angry skin, like my neighbor's dog, but often it goes deeper. Lethargy, tremors, neurological issues like seizures. You are poisoning the blood to kill the bug. It is a heavy price to pay for a walk in the woods. If we want to stop putting these harsh chemicals into our dogs, we have to stop treating the blood. We have to treat the outside. And to do that right, we have to understand how a tick actually finds a living creature in the first place. A lot of folks think ticks drop out of the oak trees. They think they fall from the branches like rain when you walk underneath. That isn't how it works at all. If you watch the edge of the pasture where the woods start, you will see a blade of tall green grass. A tick will climb right up to the very tip of it. It doesn't jump. It doesn't fly. It practices a behavior the university folks in Rhode Island call questing. It is a chilling thing to watch if you get close enough. The tick holds on to that blade of grass with its lower legs. Then it stretches its upper legs out wide into the air. It looks almost like it is reaching out to embrace something. It just sits there, perfectly still, holding those little barbed legs out. It will wait hours, even days, for a deer or your dog, or your child's denim pant leg to brush against that grass. When the cloth or the fur touches the tick, it simply closes its grip and hitches a ride. That is how they get you. They start low. They start at the boots and the paws, and then they crawl up, looking for warm skin. When you understand that, the whole problem shifts. You realize you do not need to poison the dog's entire bloodstream. You do not need to make the animal's flesh toxic. You only need to make the lower legs and the belly an impossible place for a tick to grab onto. You just have to build a barrier. The men who worked these woods 100 years ago knew exactly what to use for that. I am walking down to the woodshed now. I keep my supplies out here on the workbench. When you walk into a real Amish barn or a seasoned woodshed, you will usually smell something sharp and clean cutting right through the scent of the dust and the old hay. That is cedar, specifically the eastern red cedar. My grandfather used to take his draw knife and shave the bark and the deep red heartwood off those cedar logs every spring. He would gather those shavings up in great big burlap sacks. He used them to line the livestock bedding in the stalls. The women would take the finer shavings and stuff the family sleeping mattresses with them. They did not do this just because it smelled pleasant in the summer heat. They did it because it was a matter of survival. It kept the parasites out. Those raw cedar shavings naturally killed the mites, the fleas, and the ticks. It kept the biting bugs off the draft horses and out of the house. Our people did this for centuries, long before the chemical factories existed. They just watched the earth and saw what worked. A tick will not cross a barrier of raw cedar. It will turn around or it will die. Now, you and I do not need to stuff our pockets with wood shavings to take the dog for a walk. We have something easier. We have the pure oil pressed right out of that wood. You can buy a little dark glass bottle of Texas cedarwood oil or eastern red cedar oil at the mercantile or the town hardware store. But you have to be careful here. You have to read the label on the glass. It must say 100% pure essential oil. Sometimes the big stores sell something called fragrance oil. That is just a synthetic perfume made in a laboratory to make a bathroom smell nice. A tick does not care about perfume. You need the pure, heavy oil that comes straight from the heart of the tree itself. It sounds like old folk magic. I know folks hear about tree oils, and they think of old wives' tales. For a long time, the modern people turned their backs on the cedar tree because they thought the laboratory could do it better. But modern science finally caught up. The men in the white coats put this oil under their microscopes. They wanted to know why a simple tree extract could stop a tick dead in its tracks when it took them millions of dollars to invent a chemical to do the same thing. What they found under those microscopes is the foundation of this whole method. It is the reason I trust this around my own children and my own animals. They found out that the cedar oil targets one specific part of the bug's body, something you and I do not even have. Let me set this glass bottle down on the workbench. We need to talk about what this oil actually does to a tick when it touches the shell. Every crawling insect and every arachnid, like a tick, runs its body using a specific chemical messenger. The veterinary science books call it octopamine. It is a neurotransmitter. It acts like a master switchboard for the bug. It controls their heart rate. It commands their movement. It tells their microscopic lungs to breathe. If you disrupt the octopamine, the bug shuts down completely. Now stay with me. Here is the most important part of this whole video. God did not build a dog the way he built a tick. Mammals do not have octopamine receptors anywhere in our bodies. A human child does not have them. A farm dog does not have them. Our nervous systems run on completely different pathways. When the researchers at the USDA looked at biopesticides, they looked at cedarwood oil. They found out it is a natural blocker for those exact receptors. When this thick tree oil touches a tick, it scrambles that chemical messenger. The tick's nervous system receives a hard stop. It forgets how to move. It forgets how to breathe. The oil suffocates the bug on contact. And it does this without hurting the dog, because the dog has nothing in its body that the oil can attack. When you use the $20 drops from the vet, the chemical has to travel through the dog's liver. It goes through the kidneys and right into the blood. It taxes the dog's organs just to carry the poison. The cedar oil never goes inside. It stays on the fur. If you walk through a thick cedar grove in the heat of July, you will notice something. It is quiet. The mosquitoes are thin. The ticks are hard to find. The trees are sweating this heavy oil into the summer air to protect their own bark from boring insects, and it clears the woods all around them. We are just taking that same defense and wiping it on the dog's coat. But the wood of the cedar tree does not stop there. It attacks the bug a second way. It works mechanically. A tick is wrapped in a hard outer shell. We call it an exoskeleton. The entomology journals, the folks who study bugs for a living, explain that cedar oil actually leaches the moisture right out of that shell. For garlic, it causes a rapid osmotic dehydration. It acts a bit like salt on a garden slug, but it works on the hard armor of a tick. It pulls the water out so fast that the bug turns brittle. It dries up and dies. If you pull a tick off a dog and drop it into an empty mason jar, you can see this happen. You do not even need to drown the bug in it. If you put a single drop of pure cedar oil on a piece of torn burlap and drop it into that jar, the fumes alone will fill the glass. Within minutes, the tick will stop pacing. Its legs will curl up tight under its belly. That is the octopamine shutting down. The shell dries out right before your eyes. That is the tree doing the work the laboratory tries to mimic. I have an empty glass spray bottle sitting right here next to the kettle. I will show you exactly how many drops of this oil to use in just a minute. It is a precise measurement, and you have to mix it a certain way so it doesn't separate. But even with the best spray barrier on the legs, living out in the country means sometimes a tick will find a way. A deer will brush the fence line. The dog will roll in the brush, and a tick will find a patch of bare skin under the collar and bite down. When that happens, people panic. They run to the kitchen drawer. They grab a box of wooden matches or a heavy jar of petroleum jelly. They think the old way to handle a biting tick is to burn it. They strike a wooden match, let it burn for a second, blow it out, and press the hot tip right to the tick's back. Or they take a heavy jar of petroleum jelly from the medicine cabinet and smear it thick over the bug to smother it. If you want to keep track of old recipes and the right ways to protect your homestead without relying on the store, there is a guide down in the description that you can print out and keep in your home. Let me tell you what actually happens when you burn a tick or bury it in heavy grease. You traumatize the bug. A tick is basically a tiny swollen sack of blood and stomach fluids. When you put a hot match against its shell, it panics. It reacts violently to the heat, and when it panics, it vomits. It regurgitates everything in its stomach directly down its mouth parts and right into your dog's bloodstream or your own bloodstream. If that tick was carrying the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, you just forced it to inject that bacteria straight into the body. The CDC folks and the doctors in town are very clear on this. You do not burn them. You do not smother them. You take a pair of fine-tipped tweezers. You grab the tick right down close to the skin, and you pull straight up. You do not twist, and you do not jerk. You just pull steady until it lets go. But pulling a tick with tweezers is a failure. It means the bug already won the battle. The best method is to stop them before they ever reach the skin. So let's build the spray. I have my bottle right here on the workbench. It is just an old glass bottle I saved. I rinsed it out with well water. You do not need to buy a fancy new one. Waste nothing. We are going to put 1 cup of water into this bottle. If you have distilled water from the jug, use that. It keeps the spray fresh a little longer on the shelf. That water cost us $0. Now we need the pure cedarwood oil. When you uncap the little glass vial, you will notice the oil is thick. It moves slow. It smells like the deep woods right after a hard rain. A little bottle of this oil costs about $10 at the mercantile, but we are only using a tiny fraction of it today. We are going to measure out exactly 1 teaspoon of the oil. That comes out to about $1.90 worth of cedar. Think about that math for a second. If you buy a 3-month supply of those synthetic chemical drops for a medium-sized farm dog, you are handing over $45, maybe $60. You do that every spring, every summer, every fall. The money leaves your pocket and goes to a laboratory. For $10, you get a bottle of tree oil that will mix up dozens of these spray batches. Your cost per batch drops down to $2. There is one more ingredient. Oil and water do not like each other. If you just pour the cedar oil into the water, it will float on the top like a yellow slick. When you squeeze the trigger, you will either spray pure water or pure oil, and neither will do the job right. We need an emulsifier. We need something to bind the oil and the water together. I use 1 single drop of plain liquid dish soap. That costs about $0.10. You drop that soap in, and it breaks the heavy oil into microscopic droplets so it suspends in the water. Now, because this is a water mix and not a chemical glue, it does not last forever. I will explain exactly when you need to reapply this in just a minute. You have your cup of water, your teaspoon of oil, and your drop of soap inside the glass. You screw the heavy plastic top onto the glass threads. You have to shake it vigorously. You want to see the clear water turn into a cloudy, milky white mixture before you ever pull the trigger. When the liquid looks like milk, you are ready. But before you point that nozzle at your animal, we need to set a hard rule. Current safety word. You never spray an essential oil directly into an animal's face. A dog's nose is incredibly sensitive, far more than ours, and a concentrated oil will burn their eyes and their nasal passages. You always start at the collar and work your way down. When I take the dog out to the high grass, I call him over to the porch. I take this milky cedar spray, and I give a good firm mist across his chest and down his bare belly. Then I lift his paws. I spray the lower legs right down to the pads of his feet. I give 1 spray to the base of the tail. The dog does not flinch or try to run away because the cedar smells like the earth. It smells like the woods, not a laboratory. Then I take that same bottle and I spray my own heavy leather work boots. I spray the bottom of my denim pant legs right where the cloth meets the leather. I know the questing ticks are waiting out there in the weeds, but when they touch that cedar barrier, they will drop right back down to the dirt. Now, I promise to tell you exactly when you need. Put this back on. I will be honest with you. This is a natural tree oil suspended in water. It is not a synthetic chemical adhesive. It does not bind to the fat under the skin, and it does not waterproof the dog. If you take your dog for a walk down by the creek and he wades into the water to cool off, the creek water will wash the cedar away. If you get caught out in the pasture during a heavy summer rainstorm, the rain will wash it away. When the dog dries off, you must reapply the spray. This old method requires your attention. It asks for your time. A minute of care by the back door instead of just taking your money once a month. We also need to talk about the barn cats. I told you at the start that this is safe for dogs and horses, but it is a danger to cats. The reason is biological. A cat's liver lacks a specific enzyme. The veterinarians call it UDP glucuronosyltransferase. It is a long word, but what it means is simple. A cat cannot break down the natural phenols that are found in many essential oils, including the oil from the cedar tree. If you spray a cat with this, the phenols will build up in their liver and make them dangerously sick. We only use this on the dogs and the humans. So, if this tree oil is so effective, if it shuts down the tick's nervous system and dries out its shell for $2 a bottle, why do the English buy the chemicals? Why do the big companies sell you synthetic neurotoxins that seep into the blood instead of just selling you the oil from the cedar tree? I want you to think about how a business works. You cannot patent a tree. You cannot hold a legal monopoly on the heartwood of an eastern red cedar. And a simple oil mixed with well water does not sit on a store shelf for 5 years without separating. The big pharmaceutical companies rely on lab-made poisons because they can own the patent, and they can pack them in plastic blister packs to sit in a warehouse forever. They are selling you convenience. They are selling you a shortcut. But that shortcut puts poison into the bloodstream of the animal sleeping in your house. Tell me in the comments, where do you find the most ticks on your property? The woods, the tall grass, or the garden? I read every single one. Next time, we are going to look at a $3 trick to preserve your garden potatoes for an entire year without a refrigerator. But for today, remember that the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.